It is Tuesday, the 18th of February, 2025, and so much information coming out that people within my community have been trying to share for literally years. And it's just so refreshing to have it where it's confirmed in the mainstream media, within government at the highest levels that are actually sharing this information, including as being part of DOGE and the Speaker of the House and others, just confirming corruption. Stephen Gardner, I'm going to share like a video that he just posted as well. He's really good information there. And then again, why I'm so hopeful, even more so, is that I have to give someone like Candace Owens so much credit. She does get a lot of credit, but I'm giving her more. That even within this industry, when she started reporting on Bridget Macron, I forget when it was. It was last year, latest. I was not tracking that at all. So that had been the first time that I could ever recall that I ever got information that I wasn't aware of from someone that was mainstream media. And so this is a testament to her work. She's incredible. And of course she did get access to this information from someone that was exposing the everything that was going on in France at the time, and he was coming at it from a different perspective. Someone that was just someone that was in charge of verifying photography and legacies and things like that. So I'll let them speak, and I'm going to share directly from her website, CandaceOwens.com, not from YouTube, not from Rumble, not from anywhere else, because again, I want her to get credit and have her content being viewed from that site, because what she's been sharing is incredibly impressive. And again, it's the first time in my experience that someone from mainstream media was actually sharing information that no one in my industry was tracking at all. It was like, what the fuck? Like even with Michelle Obama, everyone was looking into that stuff, with the Barack Obama birth certificate stuff, like so many other things that people were looking into, and possible connections there with corruption and then deceit and misinformation and outright lies. And even with Kamala Harris and like her lying about her ancestry and background and things like that. But this one shocked me. And so it really shocked me, and it takes a lot. And so yeah, without further ado, I'm going to share this video first. And it's Xavier Poussard. That's the guy that literally is the one that spearheaded this actually even getting out. And Candace found him, or he found her. I don't know, but anyway.
To share with you this interview with Xavier Poussard, the journalist who initially broke the Brigitte Macron scandal via a publication. He did multiple series in it, collaborative work with Natasha Ray, who had helped him. You'll hear about that. So much is leading up to this moment, obviously. So I just wanted to let you know, when I sat down with him at the end of last year, never in a million years could I have imagined that Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte would be sending me a legal letter. I believe because they knew that this interview was going to be forthcoming, and they did not want this series to happen. And in many ways, this series may not have happened had it not been for me digging my feet further into the ground, simply because I believe in free speech and I believe in information, and I believe that what is happening in France is evil. Xavier Poussard has never before this moment appeared on camera. He has been remarkably private about his work. He has dedicated years of his life, has dealt with the brunt of what I would describe as a totalitarian government in France coming after him and his family. He has uprooted his family and had to move to Italy to make sure that they were safe and make sure that they were protected. And of course, he is not the only one. But this interview is a culmination of a year worth of work, really a year last year, where I read just the tip of the iceberg and recognized that this was an explosive story. And then when Xavier Poussard and I initially sat down and we just showed a picture of him, YouTube moved to take the interview entirely off and essentially said that we weren't allowed to discuss cults or imply anything about cults, but we felt that they had perhaps been contacted by someone with a lot of power. Well, this time, what we've done as a response is we built an entire website where we can put interviews like this up without the fear of having them taken down. And of course, that's at CandaceOwens.com. Just to let you guys know, when he and I were sitting down, I was still trying to comprehend elements of the story. So you may hear me ask questions as the viewers would ask questions, trying to understand exactly what it was that he was suggesting. That's why we felt that making this a series so that you guys could at least have the backing of the first 6 episodes. There's this unofficial biography that gets dropped about them. And what is the first thing that strikes you as peculiar?
Ce qui était très étrange dans le cas d'Emmanuel Macron,
There was an over-mediatization. The mainstream media decided to very strongly attack the other candidates during the 2017 presidential election, particularly Penelope Fillon, and sort of hail and laud everything surrounding Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte. They were essentially attacking the far right, everyone apart from them. So they tried to paint this picture of Macron as being a sort of Mozart-esque figure, that he was very virtuous and precarious. They began forming a narrative that he had met this woman when he was 17 years old. So this man of great precarious nature, a conqueror, a virtuoso, who no one could resist, essentially just as Mozart was. So the first lie was regarding age. A journalist had compiled a combination of the amount of times it was noted that they initially spun a narrative of him being 17 years old and her being 36. And so it was sort of this brave man, going after the woman he loved at a young age because he was just a daring young chap, so to say. Whereas, in fact, he was 14 at the time and she was 39. Which turns it from a brave story into a story of pedophilia and the abuse of a minor. When their real age was brought to light, there were many mechanisms of communication in the play from the couple. They really played on the way the story was brought to the public. It was sort of like Robert De Niro and Dustin Hoffman's movie Wag the Dog, where they used a spin doctor who brought certain messages to the public to distract them from the actual true scandal at hand. But there was a narrative spun of the difference in age being an issue between a man being younger and a woman being of an older age, whereas the difference of age was exactly the same between, for example, Donald Trump and Melania, yet no one batted an eye there. However, the issue is not so much the difference in age, and people sort of jumped on the bandwagon here and said, well, why? It's so unfair how a man with a more advanced age being with a younger woman is not an issue, but the reverse is quite scandalous.
Not the same
But
thing.
that is not the issue here. The issue of the age of Macron at the time when he was 14. So this is clearly the abuse of a minor rather than just having a salacious story of a difference between the age of a man and a woman.
Exactly.
So essentially what you're saying is the media tried to do the modern feminist spin on this. Somebody got involved and said, we'll take the feminist angle, the sexist angle, the misogynist angle, the ageist angle, and say, you only notice this because it's an older woman. And why is that a problematic if it's okay for Donald Trump to be dating Melania? It's actually a very smart way to try to spin it. But you're going, no. This is not about the age gap between because it's a man or a woman. Emmanuel Macron was just 14 years old and she was 39.
Yeah.
d'ailleurs,
So even when Donald Trump was paying for Stormy Daniels, again, this was a woman much older than 14 years old. I believe she was in her maybe her 30s at the time, 40s at the time, whatever. But again, even though there's an age difference, she is most definitely over the age of, let's say, 20, 25. Completely not the same thing. And when they started dating, before they got married, again, Melania, I believe, was in her 30s as well. And so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But again, in her 30s, this is not someone that looks remotely like a child, and not even remotely the age of a child, right? And so the fact that they were comparing the two, that's reaching.
ce que je t'explique,
Trump derangement syndrome. And again, I don't support everything that he is pushing, especially when it comes to biodigital convergence and AI and massive possible surveillance and maybe even, him wasting a lot of money for, going to the moon and Mars and stuff like that. But again, this is wasting taxpayers' dollars and NASA also needs to get looked into.
Actually, Brigitte Macron was on the front
Maybe I'll
page
get
of The Economist, and there was this constant push on the left to guilt people that the idea of patriarchal society is not right. They tried to portray Brigitte Macron as this Barbie doll or pin-up to the public. I believe a firm noted that in 2018, there was more content on Brigitte Macron on the internet than there was on David Beckham, who's obviously far more renowned. And the internet became saturated with these curated pictures and often doctored pictures to make her seem appealing in a pinup and focusing on her attire, etc., rather than what was really going on. Insiders in power knew, but the media didn't focus on her increasing level of political importance, which was far greater than most first ladies had in the past. They saw there were no pictures of her as a child or as a mother. They saw there was no real background on her. And initially, it was well-meaning for journalists. They just wanted to build upon this narrative which had been created around her. She's this feminist icon. She's big in politics. Let's tell her story. But they failed every time. They always faced a brick wall in the end. And I would just like to give you 2 quotes from journalists who are not some conspiracy people. They're real journalists. The first is a woman named Virginie Lenhart. She's Ashkenazi Jewish and reports on the Holocaust and such topics on French television. She said, "I needed photos of Brigitte Macron as a young woman with small children, showing an itinerary outside of those stamped by the Best Image agency. What doesn't come out is anything to do with her former life. It's a total blackout." The second journalist is Sylvie Baumel, who does portraits in the French edition of Vanity Fair. She said while conducting her investigation, "It's like an episode of Black Mirror, where the president's offices have found a way to penetrate the brains of his former acquaintances and erase everything." So we are facing something completely incredible. All these journalists who are saying, let's tell the story of Brigitte Macron, they find this woman to be something almost paranormal.
Remind you guys about American financing because I know the average person finds it difficult to keep up with monthly expenses. In most, an average of $800 a month. Amazing story to cover how this woman came to power, sort of like doing a profile piece on Michelle Obama during the Obama years. And they were sort of going, wait a minute, where is this person? How did this person come to be? I've never seen such a black hole. And this kind of gets into maybe something you never thought you were going to expect here as you were digging into this. You expected probably some holes in the story, but not, I guess, what you discovered next.
Alors parallèlement, moi je m'y intéresse parce que je fais des archives.
So what I do in my job is I archive things. This is what I really enjoy. I like going back into details and back into history and looking at people's problems. I had a bunch of people around me, my contacts in Paris, some mainstream journalists in the media who were egging me to say things. They said, go on, this is what you do. This is what I do. I take information and share it when other journalists cannot. And all of a sudden, I came across someone in my informal work surroundings, and he said, this is a man. Like, surely you can see this is a man. As if it was the most straightforward, obvious comment he could make about it. Another one of my colleagues, he's a civil servant, he calls her Amanda, which is a reference to Amanda Lear. There was a similar case. It's not well known in the United States, but Amanda Lear, she was a somewhat notorious figure. She was a muse to Salvador Dali. She was a singer and a television star. She's famous in France, so her biographies were written and rewritten, and every time they were rewritten, there were small discrepancies with dates and timelines. I got the same impression when I read Brigitte Macron's biographies. For example, the death of a sister in 1960, but we later learned it was 1961. Then the death of a niece the following year. But then when we would go dig for the information, we'd discover actually, in fact, she died in 1966. Then she says, I bought my house. We bought our house in the Le Touquet in 1950. We'd then go dig. It was actually 1957. And each time like that, the story is modified. So in fact, we say to ourselves, what is this thing? There was this element of creating complexity and confusion in order to essentially hide the elephant in the room. Going back to Amanda Lear was born Alain Tappé. He is very well known today. In fact, she was unmasked because at one time in her life, she called herself Peggy from Oslo, and she was actually Mick Jagger's drug dealer. So we are still experiencing these very borderline behaviors. My point is, this avenue of a transsexual persona has been created before, but it's very dangerous to try to delve into it because you run the risk of being branded a madman. Who is this man claiming this absurdity? Is he crazy? So I was facing that risk. I started talking to my broader network. I started going to everyone I knew, trying to figure out what was going on, because I knew there was a story here, and I wanted to deepen myself within the story. But the French, all in all, don't realize what's going on. It's not really on their radar. They're not quite aware as to how big this is. All of a sudden, I get a number from this girl called Natasha Ray. She's just a normal citizen, not a journalist. She claims to be able to prove Brigitte Macron is a man. So we begin to exchange ideas and work together for a month.
And is this the moment when you were first introduced to, I guess, the name, the person, Jean-Michel Trogneau? Because prior to, there were essentially just no pictures of Brigitte Macron for 30 plus years of his or her life. And was it Natasha that first brought forth the name to you, Jean-Michel Trogneau?
Alors, c'est quelque chose d'intéressant.
So this is something interesting. I had identified this name in the archives of documents found in the commercial courts. I ordered a lot of documents from the commercial courts called the INPI to trace companies. I was interested in the Trogneaus, and I saw this name appear which did not appear in the biographies. I realized that Emmanuel Macron wasn't really selling well to the public as a persona. He was in managerial positions and in hedge funds, and the public wasn't really gripped by this. When they decided to create a presidential candidate, they tried to focus more on the background of Brigitte Macron's family, the Trogneau family, who are a family of chocolatiers from Amiens, France, since it is a family which is rooted in the real country, in the real economy. That is to say, they are not bankers at Rothschilds. They don't do mergers and acquisitions. They make chocolates. They were even compared to the Kennedys in the French press. At that moment, we said to ourselves, why is there this insistence on each brother, each sister, each niece, etc., except one, Jean-Michel Trogneau? Jean-Michel was erased, and Natasha told me that a family photo, which was supposed to have Brigitte on her mother's lap, had been shown to the press, and she told me, but look closely at the little boy. This is Jean-Michel Trogneau. By process of elimination, it is Jean-Michel Trogneau, and this hidden brother, if you look closely, is actually Brigitte Macron. She was fully convinced, and I thought, it's very disturbing. It's worth cross-checking.
So in America, there's an expression, we say the dog that doesn't bark, right? So what's quite interesting is this is the dog that's not barking. There's all of this information about all the family members, and you recognize that there's no information about this family member. And that photograph that we saw of their family in Amiens, I remember the first time that I saw that photo because that's actually what got me involved in the case. It was, for me, a matter of common sense. I just looked at the photo, and the Daily Mail was trying to tell me that the little girl on the lap was young Brigitte, and I just looked over to the left of the photo, and I said, no, I have two eyes. Obviously, I don't even know what the theory is, but that's clearly Brigitte, a very distinct face. You can't really change your face. Well, I guess you can, but it was very distinct to me. So this is sort of what Natasha noticed is looking at this family photo, you're looking into Amiens, you're looking into the chocolatiers, and you're noticing that this boy on the left, you don't know anything about whatsoever. What happens next?
Alors, moi, je me dis dans mon journal.
In an article, I stated that, this is a legitimate question. It's one worth posing. Why is Brigitte hiding parts of her past? And why is there such an unwillingness to speak about Jean-Michel? What really prompted me to pursue this question was when Natasha and I started speaking about this, they detained her on order of a cousin of Brigitte Macron. Natasha would develop an in-depth thesis on how Brigitte Macron is Jean-Michel Trogneau and who Brigitte's children actually belong to. We then realized further that one of the cousins was trying to set us up by giving us details which weren't quite accurate, essentially sending us down the wrong avenues. They tried manipulating Natasha, myself, since I relied on this thesis for information, and another reporter as well, into pursuing these false leads, perhaps on order from the Élysée and the government itself.
Okay, so that's fascinating because and this was also something that again I always tell my listeners just common sense, right? So I'm just thinking I'm the first lady of France, I'm Candace. If somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, your brother doesn't exist or your sister doesn't exist," I'm going to take an opportunity to do a press conference. I'm going to stand next to my brother and I'm going to say conspiracy theories are harmful. Let's put this to bed. I wouldn't contact the French equivalent to the Secret Service and have them detain a journalist that's working on a story. That instantly flags me as very odd. So you're saying in addition to this, they're also giving you misinformation, ironically,
Hmm.
and trying to get you to arrive at the wrong conclusion. So you've got intimidation and you have misinformation, and all you're doing at this point is researching. You haven't even arrived at any conclusions, but that's probably making you feel like, what's going on here?
Alors, on sentait,
We realized there was a problem here since the power we were facing was becoming quite fidgety and nervous. So when Natasha brought out her thesis, she wanted to publish it quickly. I was reserved as I still only believed it was just a hypothesis that needed more. Well, the Élysée, they followed up on it, but instead of attacking the core subject, they were attacking little details. She was convicted of defamation, but it's hard for the public to understand this, as I was never convicted of anything, and she's only convicted by small details which aren't important to the meat of her argument. Once the story broke in 2021 and it was brought to light, Russia covered it, China covered it. They could have so easily at this point debunked it, showed 3 family photos, but they didn't. They could have even done so with a fake or troll account. Had one with 80 plus people that could have said, no, listen, I'm so-and-so's cousin and here is a picture, just to debunk the whole story. But they didn't, whereas they had done so in the past. When figures like Bolsonaro had been attacking her appearance, certain family members had come out and had spoken against that. But when it actually came to these rather large allegations, nothing was ever rebutted by the family. The Élysée just kept trying to tear apart the story, but only in the details rather than the substance. Natasha Ray, an ordinary citizen, had allowed everyone to discover a state secret.
Could you explain to people how it would be possible for Brigitte Macron to have mothered or fathered children, just so that part is very clear to them?
alors c'est sur ce point que je voudrais être
The 2 journalists I spoke about earlier, who both had a difficult time investigating Brigitte Macron's past, the first one came out with the famous family photo and a photo of Brigitte Macron during her first communion. The second journalist found Brigitte Macron's wedding photo taken in 1974. She is 10 years old in the communion photo and 21 in the wedding photo. But when you look at the photos closely, you can see that it is not Brigitte Macron. At that time, Natasha Ray's thesis was that they had given a photo of Tiffaine, Brigitte Macron's daughter, as the communicant, and the wedding photo was Laurence, Tiffaine's sister, getting married. It was very complicated since, in fact, this wedding photo was taken from an announcement which had been published in the local press at the time, and that would imply someone had actually made a fake newspaper and photos to finally publish a photo of Laurence. All this was very vague, and with the media coverage of Natasha Ray's thesis going on at the same time, the Élysée finally had to admit that Jean-Michel Trogneux existed by showing a person who was present at the inauguration of Emmanuel Macron. We have been told he's this little chubby man. When we saw this, we couldn't believe that the boy in the family photo had grown into this man.
So at this point, they had to admit that this Jean-Michel Trogneux character was real and essentially what you're referring to, which I did see this, they are then trying to establish almost a new legacy. They're trying to keep up with all of the questions. And they did present this photo, which again, I had not read the backstory, but I looked at that, what was clearly too modern of a photo to be Brigitte. And I looked at it and I said, wait, this is her daughter, Tiffaine. This looks like Tiffaine. And they sort of just like recolorized it into black and white, which was quite strange.
Alors, moi à ce
I
moment-là,
continued to ask questions and continued to publish stories of the boy and this character, the little chubby man. But at this point, I didn't wish to get involved in what the viewer was thinking. So I didn't want to form an opinion, and instead I just kept sharing the information I was given through Natasha. But I didn't form my own stance on the matter. I just wanted to relay Natasha's thesis in a way which would be ironclad and unassailable by someone.
So at this point, just to slow this down for our audiences, like I said, they're trying to keep essentially feed more lies to the public. And this is actually, and we'll get into Sigmund Freud and we'll get into the modern media, but they essentially believe that if you give so much information, it becomes so confusing that the public essentially just gives up because you just go, I can't follow this. So now they've introduced this photo. They acknowledge that Jean-Michel Trogneau exists, but they're not really answering questions on that. They're also introducing, like you said, the photo of Tifon, which is recolorized for whatever reason. Then you have a third photo of somebody who is this the wedding photo you're talking about? The marriage photo, and they're presenting a third photo. None of these are the same people, but it allows the public to be confused, essentially.
So I'm going to break it up a bit. I'm going to share more information, but there's so much compelling evidence and data, wrong one, that would lead one to believe that Brigitte Macron is a man and exactly who she alleges him to be. I want to get into Stephen Gardner. This was such a great video.
As well as Toronto, Canada, and Washington, D.C. A lot of big stories and videos and reactions. So thank you for joining me. Let's go ahead and jump into tonight's news. As Elon Musk and other Republicans continue to resist Democratic demands to halt spending cuts, Democrat Senator Kathy Klobuchar has warned that they are nearing the threshold of contempt of court, an offense that could potentially result in jail time for Elon Musk and the geniuses working for him. During an interview with CNN, Senator Klobuchar was asked if we are currently in a constitutional crisis, in which she responded, "We are not quite there yet because ultimately, when the final court order is made, the Trump administration is going to have to decide if they will follow it or not." Of course, it's Democratic attorney generals across the country that are bringing these cases, but they have basically said, no, Elon Musk, not start rifling through the data of Americans. That violates privacy. No, you cannot take an agreement that was made between Democrats and Republicans to fund cancer research for kids and just stop that research in its tracks. That's where we see the courts stepping in. So she's basically saying, if we don't get our way with these Democrat-approved judges from Clinton and Obama and Biden, then Trump must be evil and somebody must be arrested. Unbelievable, right? That they would go to these lengths to get that done. Now, every day I wonder to myself, why is Dr. Anthony Fauci, the fraud who funded COVID and then covered it up, not in jail? Well, listen to what Dr. Peter Navarro, Trump's top trade expert, had to say about Fauci tricking President Donald Trump. This is a man that actually did go to jail, but let me go ahead and roll this and we will watch it together.
Fauci, when he was sitting there, that SOB knew for a fact that that virus came from the Wuhan lab. He knew that because he had funded the gain of function research in that lab, and he had already begun to design a cover-up. And we know that from the emails he sent to a group of researchers, academics, trying to get their support to push that come from nature theory. And that's the biggest lie of omission in American history, because if he had simply owned up to the fact that that thing came from the lab, we could have pressured the Chinese to give us the genome sequence, which would have allowed us to design an effective vaccine rather than the crap we wound up getting. And again, Trump got lied to about that, not just by Fauci, but by Pfizer, the drug company.
In what way?
They didn't disclose the side effects of that. And they weren't clear with him. They made him think that it was a true vaccine when it's not.
Okay, wow. So you're telling me we now know with certainty that close to 19 million human beings died because of something that Dr. Fauci secretly, illegally paid for, and then secretly, illegally covered up, and then got a lifetime pardon from Joseph piece of crap Biden.
Oh my God.
We now know that Pfizer lied to the sitting president of the United States. They lied to the American people about the horrible, damaging side effects. And nobody gives a damn. Nothing happens. Life just goes on.
I care.
Well, I just wanted you to hear it from Trump's top trade expert that went to.
So yeah, his top trade expert. And this is why, if you are going to be at the highest levels of government, you need to be aware of what's actually going on, what's gone on in the past, and again, what's going on now and what's being planned to happen for the future that involve these lobbyist, military, pharmaceutical, industrial, tech conglomerates, oligarchs, aristocracies, whatever you want to call them. And again, this elite global citizens group, I mean, not citizenship, but group of entitled morons are running the show and getting the money, including taxpayers' money. And if they're not aware of that, then we're fucked at this point, right? Like I said, like even shared from ChatGPT, like how they show that democracies can fail and how there can be corruption within democracies that involve corporations and lobbyists and people within the pharmaceutical industry or donors and sponsors to political campaigns and stuff like that, and how that can skew results and then election rigging, all of this stuff. And anyways, I'm going on these tangents, but our prime minister should know that we didn't land on the moon. He should know that, and he should know about 9/11. He should know exactly what's going on in Israel and Palestine and Iran and in Ukraine and Russia. They need to know about USS Liberty. They need to know about Northwoods. They need to know about like what happened in World War I and World War II, what actually happened, and they have to look at the entire world and assess the geopolitical environment as well. And even with that following the banking systems and stuff like that. But anyways, I digress. If Trump was given accurate information from like a third party source, someone like an international security advisor, right, that can look through pharma bullshit and CIA bullshit and FBI bullshit, and actually like get to the truth based on their own independent research, then I think that is literally the only way ahead at this point, because he's going to keep on getting lied to. And so even now, like Trump, he was a president for 4 years. Like how did he not have access again to like the real like moon landing hoax, right? Like and so why did he not address that? Why is this not disclosed? Same thing with 9/11 and with JFK, all of that stuff. Like so there's so much, and even with the shape of the earth. So and the fact that there's going to be no friggin' like alien invasion as we're being led to believe, like these friggin' aliens from like outer space, like trillions of light years away in the galaxy, and like, that's not happening. It's not Star Trek. And so if they're gonna lie to him about this stuff as well, then again we're fucked, right? Like, and that involves Canada too.
To jail because he refused to bow down to Nancy Pelosi in the January 6th shenanigans. All right, I want to talk more about some big DOGE fines, but first, I want to tell you how disappointed I am in Congress, as well as President Zelensky of Ukraine. He's now demanding that the U.S. government give Ukraine an additional $250 billion in taxpayer money. He's now having private meetings with the heads of European nations, telling them that the United States of America will abandon them as they have abandoned Ukraine, will abandon the rest of Europe, and that Europe should go on the offense and abandon the United States of America before they have the opportunity. So let me go ahead and pull this to the screen, and let's go ahead and look at this together. This is over on CNN. Zelensky warns days of guaranteed U.S. support for Europe are over, as General Kellogg says Europeans won't be at table for peace talks. So he goes on to tell leaders and military people of European countries, you cannot trust the United States of America, doesn't need Europe at the table, that the old days are over. America will no longer support Europe. I mean, this dude has some serious sour grapes. Right? Am I reading this wrong?
Nope.
This guy's telling us cough up more money. This guy's telling our European allies, people that we defended in World War II and World War I, that we don't care about you just because your war has no possible way of being won. We're already over $200 billion, and now you want another $200 billion. This guy has some serious sour grapes. He says he's refusing to end the war, that Europe should put up more money, more weapons, and be willing to fight Russia and have their own soldiers die, just like the Ukrainian soldiers did. He's telling people, Europe, wake up. America has abandoned you and will no longer be there for you. I mean, this is insane. I cannot believe this. I cannot believe that Zelensky, after we gave him so much weapons and assistance and money, this war is over.
And
over 1 million people are dead.
If it wasn't for the U.S. and NATO, they wouldn't have been in a war, in a proxy war, a money laundering scheme where the majority of the money is going to the already billionaire elite class in Ukraine and other places in Europe and the world, including Canada and the U.S. And the money that and again, it's just, there's a lot to this. And the CIA staged and planned coup in Ukraine, and that was a decade ago. And CIA have been involved in destabilization events all over the world and especially in the Ukraine. Like this is open source information. And so if they were not involved in there, would this war have happened? No. And there was peace talks on the table, like even months prior to the declaration of war officially, and something I had on my whiteboard even weeks before, and I've proven that. So it's because, again, wasn't a surprise or a shock. And this could have been where there was a bit of land that was taken over by Russia. And again, within these areas, there were people that were largely lived there. So it's in the gray, right? There were people that were of Russian and or Ukrainian heritage or lineage in these areas. And again, it's also complicated because it was only as of 91 that the Soviet collapsed, and there was any form of like bordering like adjustments made and stuff like that. And so very complicated, actually very complicated borders in World War I and World War II too. Anyway, but people actually wanted to be part of Russia. Right. And so like they wanted to have elections, they wanted to have a referendum and stuff like that was being refused and denied by Zelensky. And again, that's not very democratic of him. Right. And so people were not looking at that. People were trying to get Russian passports, and that was getting denied and declined on the Ukrainian side with Zelensky, political prisoners, religious prisoners. And again, this guy is taking so much of the money. He literally gave, it was upwards of like $72 million worth of assets for yachts to brothers, friends of his. And it's just, this needs to stop. And so America needs to admit the involvement, the level of involvement they actually did have and why, and where the money went, because there was a lot of lives lost. Anyway,
10 million have fled for their lives. And now to our faces, you tell us that we're going to abandon you? We're trying to end your war, you idiot.
Finally.
Let me know over in the comments. To me, this is a slap in the face, saying that America is going to abandon Europe, that we've abandoned Ukraine. My gosh, we've given you hundreds of billions of dollars. So disgusting to me. Really, really agitates me when you see stuff like this. And then, it doesn't help when you have people like Lindsey Graham. Listen to this. Let's just listen to this together.
I want to tell you and your people, you're the ally I've been hoping for all my life. Not one American has died defending Ukraine. You've taken our weapons and you've kicked their ass. And I'm very proud to have you as our ally. I want to tell you and your people.
Stop that. Okay, let me go back here now. Do you hear what Lindsey Graham is saying? I mean, I can't believe Zelensky is sitting in the presence of this fool.
Yeah.
He's literally saying to him, we got to extort you and extract hundreds of billions of dollars for my friends and allies at the military industrial complex. All of your people got to die. Your country's been blown to hell, but look at the dent you've put in Russia. And not one American has had to die. Zelensky, you are a fool. This guy does not give a damn about Ukraine. He doesn't care about you. All he cares about is funneling money to the military industrial complex. And if an American doesn't have to die and the people that vote him into office get billions and billions and billions of dollars, I've been saying this for 3 years now. Joe Biden wanted to go down as a wartime president, as a war hero, where he says, I beat Vladimir Putin, I beat Russia, and not one American died. But that's not the case. All they did was funnel money to the military-industrial complex while 1 million Ukrainians died or were injured. Lindsey Graham, you are such a pathetic human being. And I cannot believe Zelensky just sat there while he said, all your people get to die and no Americans die. Wake up. This war needs to end right now. Unbelievable. All right, let me keep going here. Let me know what you guys think of Lindsey Graham. Is he a good guy? Type yes. Is he a bad guy? Type no. I want to hear from you guys. I don't think he's a good guy. He constantly stabs Trump in the back. He cares more about going to war. He's a war hawk. He's a total war hawk. While the Trump administration was ordered to pause their funding halts while the courts review if they have the proper authority, it appears Elon Musk and his team of geniuses are not slowing down. They'll just move on to the next corruption. According to a recent announcement from the Department of Government Efficiency, they just recovered another $1.9 billion that was sitting in a financial black hole. On X, DOGE details the findings by stating $1.9 billion of HUD, Housing and Urban Development money, was just recovered after being misplaced during the Biden administration due to a broken process. These funds were earmarked for the administration of financial services, but were no longer needed. So they were literally just sitting there. 1.9 billion.
Oh my God.
Secretary Turner and DOGE worked together to fix the issue and de-obligate those funds, which are now available for other use by the U.S. Treasury. For the first time in a long time, our government is about to have extra money. Can you imagine? I don't think we've had extra money since Bill Clinton. Not only is useless spending being cut, but even government employees who don't want to work in person are being cut. The employees cut are so substantial that they have even impacted Washington, D.C.'s housing market. According to the Kobesi Letters report, since DOGE began discussing mass layoffs, the median home price in Washington, D.C. has dropped $139,000 in just 30 days, as 4,000 new homes are listed on the real estate websites. That's crazy. Can you imagine your house losing $140,000 in value overnight? Unbelievable. These people must be absolutely panicking. But for me, it makes me very happy because guess what? You guys have been firmly attached to the government like an umbilical cord, and it's time to be cut. Our government cannot sustain the level of printing and debt and new money. It's disgusting, right? Which brings me to today's sponsor. Now, I hate to say this, but the US dollar isn't as strong as it used to be. And so are gold and silver years from now. Now, I want you to let the team of experts over at Colonial Metals Group help kick off the IRS. Quarter czar Tom Homan stated, In the last 24 hours, the U.S. Border Patrol has encountered a total of 229 aliens across the entire southwest border. This down from 11,000 a day under Joe Biden.
So I will say that those numbers were, I'm being led to believe, were inflated to create more of a psyops, to create more fear mongering and stuff like that. And so, overreported.
So 11,229. Thank you, Donald J. Trump and Tom Homan and the military and Border Patrol and DHS. Thank you so much. Even though these numbers sound unbelievable, they are true. A 97% decrease in illegal immigrants flooding into the country. If this number isn't absolute proof that Biden was a fool and treasonously wanted to destroy the United States of America, well, there's your proof. It's right in the math, and math cannot lie. But while most of the recent news has been positive, there's also a few things that Trump and his administration are struggling with. One of those is a recent string of plane crashes, with the most recent one being a Delta flight, which sadly flipped over and lost its wings as it crashed and burned. Very, very sad. This is going to have to be researched, but basically, it was also a few things that Trump and his administration are struggling with. Coming into Toronto, and it ended up flipping over, and it was just, it's bad. Let me go ahead and show that here on screen. Oh, no, we don't want to see any more of Lindsey Graham. Okay, here we go. Share this one instead. So here's the plane wreck. I'm going to get myself out of the screen for a second. Just absolutely sad. I mean, this is the airplane. It's upside down. The firemen had to come out. This is an upside down plane with no wings. That is not how you want to see your airplane. I mean, they're rushing people out of here. Holy fuck. Oh, shoot. Sorry about that language. But I mean, this is not the way you want to arrive at an airport. Gratefully, people survived. They were able to jump out. The airport and the airport fire department immediately jumped on this. Just so grateful. This could have been just an absolute tragedy. But again, this is not the way that you want to arrive in Canada. Just absolutely terrifying. So sad. So grateful that everybody is okay. Did you guys see that story? Wow. All right, now.
Okay, so before he ends, I did want to share a bit of that because it was in Toronto, which is about 4.5 hours away from where I am in the province that I'm living in. And so here's just a few more photos of it. C'est en français, je m'excuse. Just more videos of it here. The actual crash itself. Oh my goodness. 18 people all survived. They were coming in from Minneapolis into Toronto. So, just because, and it's not to slam Stephen Gardner at all, just he didn't share that video, so like I thought that maybe it warranted. And okay, I'll stop sharing that for now. And I'm just going to share an article. Delta Airlines flight from Minneapolis appears to crash in Toronto. This was yesterday. A Delta Airlines regional jet appears to have crashed at Toronto's Pearson International Airport. In a social media post, the airport operator said it was aware of an incident upon landing involving a Delta Airlines plane arriving from Minneapolis. According to the post, emergency teams responded and all passengers and crew members were accounted for. The Association of Flight Attendants, members of which were working on the flight, wrote a social media post that there were reportedly no fatalities. Flight tracking website, the flight involved was Delta 4819 from Minneapolis to Toronto. It was operated by Endeavour Air for Delta Connection using a CRJ 900. And all survived. 80 people. Okay. Investigators are looking into what made a Delta plane crash land and flip over at Toronto's Pearson Airport on Monday, an incident all 80 people on board survived. Officials have yet to say what caused the crash. Okay. So just wanted to give like a little bit more information on that. But Stephen Gardner, like this video is so interesting. He covers a lot.
Representative Eric Swalwell, you know, the guy that was sleeping with a Chinese spy in California, he's saying that this particular airplane crash is Donald Trump's fault and that there's never been a president with so many airplane crashes in their first month. So I looked into this. Breitbart News did an in-depth showing that Trump has had 35 incidents and Biden had 55. Now, Trump is committed to rebuilding the FAA,
No, not too soon.
the towers, the number of people that are helping, getting DEI out of Delta and JetBlue and Continental and American Airlines, getting things back to normal. All right, switching gears, the media has continued to use their liberty of freedom of speech to blast freedom of speech. During a recent CBS News interview, host Margaret Brennan responded to Vice President J.D. Vance's pro-freedom of speech given in Munich, Germany, by claiming that Hitler was able to weaponize Germany, kill 6 million Jews in the Holocaust because of freedom of speech. Good thing she had a guest who has incredible knowledge of World War II. Secretary of State Marco Rubio responded by saying, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and hated minorities and hated those, and they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews, he says. There was no freedom of speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was no opposition to Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed the country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history. Now, these guys use Nazis and Hitler for everything. Trump's a Nazi. Trump is Hitler. The Jews died because of freedom of speech, not because of Hitler. The mainstream media is just absolutely full of the stupidest people. It's so stupid. All right, now, people are arriving in Saudi Arabia from Russia, the United States, the United Kingdom. There in Saudi Arabia, they are going to have their first true meeting about ending the Russia-Ukraine war. Putin has his envoy. Trump has his envoy. Britain has their envoy. I'm just hoping and praying that we can come to some kind of resolution. But guess what? Zelensky says America owes him more money. And Zelensky says, watch out, Europe. America will abandon you. Watch out, Europe. The country that saved you from World War I and World War II, they're about to throw you under the bus and abandon you. I'm so sick of Zelensky. But then again, I think he's sick of me too, because as you know from watching my show, I am on the Ukraine death list for a journalist that told a truth other than what they have deemed as their truth. So that sucks, but I didn't want to go to Ukraine anyway. And guess what? I've got nothing against the Ukrainian people.
Me either.
They're a beautiful people. Mm-hmm. It breaks my heart that they went to war in the first place. I can't believe I had to cover this war for 3 years, but here we are, still at war.
Yeah, he covers a lot of good ground. Oh. Gotta take off soon, but the Vigilante Fox. Dr. Deborah Birx makes 2 shocking COVID admissions. The conspiracy theorists were right again. The narrative surrounding the COVID crisis is crumbling, and now Dr. Deborah Birx is admitting that what the conspiracy theorists knew all along in an apparent effort to save her own skin. Dr. Birx, who served as White House coronavirus response coordinator under President Trump, admitted during a recent appearance on Piers Morgan, Uncensored, that the government botched the COVID response by overlooking early treatment. What I witnessed was a lot of undiagnosed disease that could have been treated early, that then resulted in COVID deaths, Birx lamented. Birx literally echoed what dissident doctors had been saying from day one. Early treatment saves lives. Instead of listening, they silenced doctors like MD Breathe, threatened to take away their license and let people die. Houston doctors suspended for spreading dangerous misinformation in response to allegations. In a 2022 exchange with Rep. Jim Jordan, Republican Ohio, Birx was cornered into admitting that the Biden administration's claims about the jab's efficacy were based on hope, not science. Jordan, when the government told us the vaccinated couldn't transmit it, COVID, was it a lie or guess, Birx? I think it was hope that the vaccine would work in that way.
Or were they lying? Well, here's what I'm concerned about with. Let me ask the question this way. When the government told the American people that people who had been vaccinated couldn't get it, were they guessing or were they lying?
I don't know. All I know is there was evidence from the global pandemic that natural reinfection was occurring. And since the vaccine was based on natural immunity, you cannot make the conclusion that the vaccine will do better than natural infection, although it can often do slightly better.
But I think that's,
No.
I mean, you're an expert. You were on the task force. You were part of this effort when you were in the previous administration. And
What
you're
did I
saying
say
in
about
this
natural
administration that you
yeah.
can't rule
Better.
out the fact that our government was lying to us when they told us the vaccinated could not get the virus.
I don't know about their discussions that they had in the task force. So I can't tell you that. I can tell you as a family member who had individuals that were susceptible, of course we got everybody vaccinated, but we still use layered protection during surges because I knew potentially the vaccine immunity would wane like natural immunity waned. And there was evidence that every 4 months reinfection was occurring in South Africa.
Wow. When the government told us that the vaccinated couldn't transmit it, was that a lie or was that a guess? Or is it the same answer?
And I showed the proof about the waning immunity, and it was actually even shorter than the 4-month period, like she's saying, where even like the white blood cells that are actually, they target infections were not properly growing at optimal levels or at the levels they were before. And natural immunity, already talked about that. And the fact that you can actually contract COVID via the inoculation. And even on the VAERS, which again, we've showed, I even had a discussion with ChatGPT yesterday about it that I showed that it was completely over-reported.
I think it was hope that the vaccine would work in that way. And that's why I think scientists and public health.
Oh yeah, people contracting COVID via inoculations, and the VAERS were underreported. So again, they were saying it was upwards of even like 90% of underreported. And so even the fact that 4.6% of people that with the VAERS that were reported contracted COVID, and by the way, even fatalities in a significant amount, and that doesn't it says 4.6% of people contracted COVID via inoculation. I shared these VAERS so many times, and if you want them, I'll send them to you. But then it said, but they with coronavirus and COVID, like they would classify it under different lines so that you wouldn't get the full like amount of actual people that were contracting these respiratory illnesses via inoculation, and then again the multiple fatalities, and a crime.
Leaders always have to be at the table, being very clear what we know and what we don't know.
This is important for the country to know. So when I asked the question, when the government told us that the vaccinated couldn't get it, and I asked you if it was a guess or a lie, you said you don't know. You said you think it was hope. So what we do know is it wasn't the truth. So they were either guessing, lying, or hoping, and communicating that information to the citizens of this country.
So on that note, I want to get into bird flu, but before I do, of course, I want to share the VAERS, if it will allow me. See what date one. I just want to make sure. So this is 28 February 2021. So 4 years ago. And I shared this to so many people, to tip lines, to media, to all levels of government, cabinet experts, you friggin' name it, contacts that I had worked with on the, like on with the highest levels of government, like I keep on saying, but people that had access to people at the top and that could have possibly like made a difference with this. And I was sharing this, and then the March of 2022 VAERS reports. This is just from Pfizer alone, and again, they had access to this. This is from Pfizer, like it released from them as well. A cumulative analysis of post-authorization adverse events reports. And if I just do a search, just putting in COVID, again, just so it can be transparent. And again, it's for here and for the, it was even more so. But look, infections and infestations. Look at this, COVID-19 highlighted. There were this many VAERS reported, and this was from the UK reports from Pfizer. And So so many different adverse events that were not reported. And that's just one of them. And that's one of the lesser significant ones. But again, fatalities reported. Again, COVID-19. Anyway, and so I will also share, 1 second. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Bear with me. Yeah, okay, so you see it. Good. I was able to transfer over. Okay, so this is lock date 16 March 2022, report run date 21 March 2022. So Pfizer had to get sued. And this was during the time when war was declared, Russia-Ukraine stuff. And so I think that this was done intentionally to distract us from this having to be released. I just did a Control F and I just put in COVID. And so every single page is titled COVID. So I have to go through like a bunch of pages first before I get into the actual, what I want to show you. Okay, so what I was saying, coronavirus infections. It says asymptomatic COVID-19, and this is people that these are VAERS. So these were from the inoculations, ladies and gentlemen. Again, this is not me making this up. This is from Pfizer alone. And again, underreported. I'm going to reiterate that. So 21, there was no fatalities. Cool. But I'll just show you here. This is just to show you total and fatal. COVID-19, 2,567, 41 fatal. Again, this is just in one population group. COVID-19 pneumonia, so they're calling it something different. Total of 52, 15 fatal. Coronavirus infection, 7. Post-acute COVID-19. Severe acute respiratory syndrome, suspected COVID-19. And again, 88, and then 4 fatal. And so the hypocrisy that not only did it not prevent the spread and it not make you immune or protected, but it also actually could have made you risk actually contracting the very thing that they were trying to protect you against. And again, you can't even make this shit up. And it was not a vaccine, and we did not aspirate needles, and that was another significant issue because there's difference between intramuscular versus intracellular versus subcutaneous, like mechanisms of delivery versus oral, and it all responds differently into our bodies. And so now I want to get into bird flu and Trump's policies on that right now. And I've talked about gain of function, bird flu, Athena, Georgia, and other areas even within the U.S., where I will reiterate they are doing gain of function motherfucking bird flu. I shared proof of that even yesterday, I believe, or the day before. And because it's open source information. And again, it's funded by NIH, it's funded by Fauci. And okay.
Let's just call it Agenda 2030. Welcome to today's show, everyone. It's not taking Donald Trump and his new administration long to bring about every new world order agenda that we could possibly imagine. Let's just call it Agenda 2030 in real time, occurring in 2025. And again, nobody's paying attention to this. So the bird flu is something we've been programmed with over the last couple of years. We've constantly heard about it. Many people were assuming that the bird flu would be disease X. Now, I discussed that they wouldn't use the bird flu as disease X, that the bird flu would serve a greater purpose for them to be able to get this gene editing mRNA into the food supply chain. So what they've done is obviously create story after story after story about mutations, how suddenly cows conveniently have the bird flu. Now suddenly humans are getting the bird flu. And the company called Zoetis has been chosen by the Trump administration, apparently. The company has received conditional approval for a bird flu vaccine from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And they're already putting out propaganda to make sure people don't really pay attention to it. Things like chickens get the bird flu vaccine, not people, right? Because immediately what people are going to start doing is start saying, whoa, not again. Whoa, I don't want to get one for the bird flu. And again, we'll still have suckers who would actually go and get injected for a flu shot from an actual bird flu, which is how insane people have gotten. But they're making sure people realize, look, it's just for the chickens. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. But it is, in fact, a big deal. So Trump's USDA has approved this new experimental bird flu vax for meat and egg producing chickens. This is the same manufacturing company that injected over 100 million wildlife animals during the last quote unquote pandemic. And it looks like they've taken a pivot here away from CRISPR, but there is a direct connection between CRISPR and Zoetis. Remember, when they start seeing people catching on, and this is based all off of the data that they get online. Remember when I covered Bill Gates? And if you didn't see that video, it's available on the website. When Bill Gates just had this Netflix documentary, and he literally had this massive algorithm that was tracking in real time every single keyword, every single word or hashtag that not only involved him, but involved the technology and the companies that he was working with. They do this not because they care if somebody's doing a Bill Gates exposed video. They do this to gauge the public, to see what they're suspicious of and what they're not. So CRISPR, again, was leading the way as being the one who was going to likely produce this bird flu vax. And in fact, we even just recently heard how RFK Jr., who is now the health czar in America, was an investor in CRISPR leading up to being selected by Donald Trump, because they announced this to everybody conveniently, the stocks they're invested in, and they supposedly were told that they have to sell all their stocks away, which we know they never actually do. That's how these people on a $100,000 salary have about 10 different homes like Nancy Pelosi and the rest of them. So Zoetis is not directly like CRISPR. Let me give you what the Google search will tell you, right? They'll say, no, it's not the same thing. They do both involve genetic manipulation. But Zoetis is a large animal health company focused on developing drugs and vaccines for animals, while CRISPR is gene editing. Specifically, the technology can be used in various fields, including animal health, but it's not a company itself. However, Zoetis does actively research and utilize CRISPR technologies. In fact, Zoetis employees have been trained and provided expertise on CRISPR technology, cell culture, and flow cytometry, okay? They just had a class, a microbiology cure class, where they partnered together, CRISPR with Zoetis, for animal health. And why is this important? For anybody out there, it's like, I don't get it. If the bird's going to get the shot, what do I actually care? Because, and I'll show you a clip so you can get it in more detail later in the video, CRISPR gene editing will be passed from can be passed from a parent to a child. So in other words, if an adult received this, which we just heard about during the outbreak, and then that adult breastfed the child, guess what? It's going into the child, and they don't have a clue, and they don't even realize what gene editing is. So in this case, this is how they say, hey, none of these people, we're not getting enough people running to their pharmacy to get this in their body. Now more and more people are skeptical, as we see, of actually getting one. In fact, even the MAGA supporters, as much as they'll give Trump a pass with everything he does, they're not going to run and go get one just because Donald Trump says to go get one, because he's the one who created Operation Warp Speed. So most of these people don't realize that by getting into the food supply chain, by directly starting with chickens, and yes, I understand that they already do experiments like this, but this is a way that they can start by saying, look, we're going to go to all the Purdue chicken farms. We're going to go to all the big national farms. We're going to make sure they all have it. So when you eat the food, you don't have to worry about getting the bird flu, because we've convinced you over the last couple of months/years that humans are getting the bird flu from being interacting with chickens, let alone eating some of these chickens, right? So we need to get these chickens to get this potion inside of them. And everyone will go, okay, I guess it's not a big deal, right? Don't they they do this to cows and chickens, right? Right, but what they don't tell you is that it's transmissible. So once they get it in the chickens at all these big farms, and you go to the grocery store and you buy some eggs, it's transferable to you. And this starts with the big farms, but it ends up, what they care about more is independent farmers like us. Because again, we don't have the slightest clue what they're already putting in the food supply chain. I mean, we've seen video clips, I'm sure most of you have, I covered it over the years, where pretty much the food's magnetized, right? People are holding magnets up to their chicken, and they're seeing the black graphene goo, the ferrofluid graphene combo coming up, right? So they're already doing stuff to the food supply chain. This shut down their operations. How many stories have we heard about the Amish over the last couple of years, where the Amish are getting picked on by Big Brother? Big Brother enables. It's a tool, that when they go in and they edit the genes of an embryo, it can be passed on to future generations. So if you remember, I don't know, how many people are still here, but I know there's a good amount of you. Obviously, I talked about this at least 2 years ago. Okay, they were talking about proof of concept that CRISPR was going to be the one that came out with this gene editing technology. And clearly they saw and see how many people are aware of what CRISPR is, aware that it could be passed on, right? So all these stories were out there about scientists harnessing CRISPR. So all they did is just pivot over to Zoetis here. Zoetis, which is working with CRISPR anyway. This is what they do. People go, oh, I don't know about Zoetis, right? Oh, and Zoetis has a connection to Pfizer, right? Don't worry about that either, right? They don't want you to think that, they don't want you to hear any of these scary words that might get you worried, like Pfizer or Moderna or CRISPR. So you also might remember during the outbreak, they were talking about University of California, grow and eat your own vaccines, right? Because they were attempting then to get it in the food supply chain. And again, I mentioned earlier, we had Zuckerberg and Gates. They put so much money into quote unquote funding a study in which 100 white-tailed deer received the Pfizer PCR test and mRNA right? This was during the outbreak. Zuckerberg and Gates, your meat and vegetables and pets were being injected with it, right? Plenty of articles out there. They weren't even hiding it. Hunters were the first people to discover that a lot of these animals were injected based on what they were seeing with, the animals and the animal behavior. Don't forget the zombie deer thing that was going on I talked about. All of a sudden, these deer were showing up, standing there like zombies, frozen in the middle of the road. Cars are coming down the road. The zombies are standing there, not moving. I wonder what that was from, right? A fart in the wind, and all of a sudden the deer were paralyzed in the streets because this is what they've been doing and continue to do. So the company has received conditional approval, okay? And one of the things that people out there need to remember is stuff like this. In the UK, where they do this, they go, oh, no, we're not going to make it mandatory. We're not going to make it mandatory, okay? The farmer can decide what to do, because this is how they just twist things. But it says here, to prevent further spread, the Environment Department has imposed mandatory culls of birds within a 3-kilometer radius of a confirmed case, right? So you have your social distancing with the pets here, with the chickens, right? Oh, your chicken, well, you might have your own farm and you're independent. Well, you know what? One of the chickens you brought in to your backyard here, well, one of them got in contact with another one, and now your whole flock is contaminated. So we're going to have to come in and we're going to have to provide it. Don't worry, we'll do it free of charge to help you out, And again, that's another way they can trick some of these people who are not aware of what any of this stuff is with gene editing. And they'll go, well, all right, I guess, what's the big deal, right? Right. And then it just continues to spread in the food supply chain. And don't forget, too, recently, and again, this video scrubbed because I believe it was on one of the ones that was terminated. They talked about in the backyard. Remember that predictive programming? They literally aired like 40 stories with their Sinclair Broadcasting Group where they were saying, quote, backyard flock. They kept saying it, backyard flock, because they were getting people conditioned to realize, hey, backyard flock, it sounds a lot different than, hey, there's a massive poultry farm for Purdue that has 1 million chickens on it. No, backyard flock, because that's really what they actually care about. And I'm just going to play for you this clip for anybody out there that doesn't understand this technology. And I don't expect people to understand. If this stuff wasn't happening in the world, I couldn't care less or wouldn't care less about CRISPR, because I would never, ever, ever allow this technology inside of my body. But now that we know what they're doing, it's important to become aware of what the enemy is trying to do. And people just don't seem to grasp what this gene editing is. And I'll play for you now them talking about, of course, a TED Talk, how neat it is, and specifically talking about, you want to have a baby that's 6 feet tall. Well, we'll we'll go in and edit the embryo of the mom, right? And when the mom gives birth to the baby can be 6 feet tall. You want your baby to be born with a beard? You want the bearded woman to come out of your mother's, is that what you want to come out of your womb? You want some circus freak to come out? No problem. With CRISPR, we can go in and do that. And then people don't realize, well, that means that whatever they're doing to the genes of the mother is being passed on to the child, right? So they're already editing the genes of the child. That's what they'll do with the chickens, right? The eggs will be transmissible. That's the point of all of it. So here they are talking about it. And remember what Claus said, right? It's you who are changing. That's what the fourth industrial revolution is.
CRISPR is amazing because it allows us to precisely edit the DNA in living organisms, including in people and plants. With CRISPR, we can change, remove, or replace the genes that govern the function of cells. This means that we now have the ability to use CRISPR like a word processor to find, cut, and paste text.
In 2011, scientists created glow-in-the-dark cats. The researchers took a gene from glowing jellyfish and inserted it into the unfertilized eggs of house cats. It was a neat trick, but they had a bigger goal in mind. They also made the cats more likely to be resistant to a feline form of AIDS by, again, manipulating their DNA. And cats aren't that different than humans. In fact, we share around 90% of our DNA with them. So why can't we engineer humans in the same way? Well, we can. Engineer ourselves to be resistant to life-threatening illnesses, that is. In fact, one scientist claims that he's genetically engineered 2 babies using a revolutionary tool called CRISPR. But what exactly is a CRISPR baby anyway? Would you like to be 6 feet tall or never bald? The secret to traits like these lies in the 6 billion letters of your genetic code. But there can be something else in there as well: mutations. Genetic mutations are linked to at least 6,000 medical conditions, from sickle cell anemia to Huntington's disease. But what if you could make those mutations simply disappear? That's where the gene editing tool CRISPR comes in. CRISPR is made from specialized proteins and other compounds found in certain bacteria. Normally, these proteins protect the bacteria by destroying enemy invaders like viruses. But the inventors of CRISPR figured out how to turn those proteins against genetic mutations and other genes linked to disease. First, they give the proteins coordinates of the wanted gene, Then, CRISPR runs a seek and destroy function. After that, other molecules are dispatched to repair the gene with new, healthy DNA. And just like that, you can edit the human genome. But while the edits may be quick, their changes can last for centuries, especially if you're editing the DNA in an embryo. Embryos start out with a single cell that eventually replicates into millions and then trillions more. So if you alter that initial cell first, you're manipulating the ingredients for every cell that follows later in life. And those same altered cells can be passed on from generation to generation. That's one reason why most experiments on human embryos haven't left the lab. That is, except for the work of Dr. He Jiankui. He claims to have used CRISPR to target and knock out the CCR5 gene in human embryos, which is linked to HIV infection. And then he did something that shocked the scientific community. He implanted the embryos into several women, one of whom gave birth to genetically modified twins. Resistance to HIV aside, most scientists say the procedure was too risky. At least 2 studies suggest that edited cells might actually trigger cancer. And another found that CRISPR can accidentally take aim at healthy DNA. So while CRISPR could make us immune to disease, who knows what else we might get on the side? He implanted the embryos into several women, one of whom gave birth to genetically modified twins.
The features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
The difference of this fourth industrial revolution is it doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you. If you take genetic editing, right. Just as an example, it's you who are changed. Yeah, and of course, this has a big impact on your identity.
Yeah. And offers certain kinds of possibilities that have to be careful about. You know, when you began to do that kind of gene editing, some people worry that you were changing what it means to be human.
That's the problem. Of course, the new industrial revolution offers us many opportunities, but it raises many fold questions on the ethical, but even legal implications. And we have to be prepared for it. And that's what we want to do in Davos next year. So this fourth industrial revolution is, it doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you. If you take genetic editing, right. Just as an example, it's you who are changed.
So that's the big plan. That's what they're doing now. It's going to be quiet in the background because as long as people don't feel bothered like they were a few years ago, which I mean, you know, the government overreach was insane. People getting arrested based on going out after dark because we were given curfews like children, forced to lose our job. Nobody cared if people were able to pay for groceries anymore to feed their family. They're more concerned about the common cough. It's unbelievable what we allowed them to get away with. But I said it then and I'll say it again. It's all about getting this specific tech inside of the body. And if they know, and they're literally watching and listening to everything everyone says. People think that means, oh, they're watching and listening. Like they're going to show up at my front door and arrest me. Well, I haven't committed a crime. I mean, they could show up and whack me, sure. But they're listening. They're listening to see how they can manipulate, how they can maneuver. Because there's more ways than just getting it directly into you by getting you to volunteer and go get it. That was phase 1. And they saw, we don't even know what the real data is, right? They were telling us like 70% of the population had it, 80%. Nobody was buying any of that. I mean, we all know somebody that fell for it. And I'm sure just like some of you, I know people that didn't last over a year once they got it. Perfectly healthy people. I know multiple ones who were in their 60s. Bye-bye. Went quick. Didn't take my advice, which again, I tell people out there all the time, like I'm trying to wake people up. Look, people closest to you are the hardest ones to wake up. I know that from experience as well. So they know that the data did not support the evidence that they were trying to give their make-believe science and their make-believe statistics. But if they have to get it in you and they have to do all these other things to do so, to manipulate people into thinking, oh, it's just for the chickens, it's not a big deal, because it's too many steps for them. Right? Oh, they go from there to there. They go, I don't know, I'll take my chances then. As long as they're not doing it to me, as long as they're not telling me I got to show up here and do this and I got to go twice, I got to go get my second shot, right? Go get my food. No. Right? They are coming for the food supply chain in every way possible. And again, we know that they manipulate, Purdue. And, I don't think anyone out there listens to my channel is eating Purdue meat. But this is about being able to require farmers, anybody out there who even just has chickens in their yard to comply. Mm-hmm. Because you don't think that they are aware. I mean, somebody would message me a couple of weeks ago, and they bought a bunch of chickens. And they were like, they wanted my ID and they wanted my birth certificate. Right? Well, what do you think that is? because they want to, make sure that you're petting your chickens every day. They want to come over and say, "Oh, are you giving your chickens a bath? We want to make sure your chickens are having a wonderful life." I mean, maybe some of these people probably are thinking that with the way the world has gone. Oh, I'm going to come over. I'm going to visit the chickens. We're going to miss the chickens here from Tractor Supply. No, it's so that they know who has chickens, where the chickens are, and all they have to do is say, "Hey, you got yours at Tractor Supply? Guess what? Your chickens came in contact months prior."
Yeah, that was super interesting and terrifying, but stuff I've shared before. Just more reinforcement of proof. Conspiracy theorists were right. I want to get into my social media, and then I'm going to take off and go to the gym with a friend. So the title of this is "The Average Person in Amsterdam Noticing for the First Time After Witnessing It with Their Own Eyes." So this is just me reading this off. Israeli, here you go, chanting "F the Arabs" and "No school in Gaza because all the children are dead." Attacking and vandalizing homes that have a Palestinian flag. Residents start fighting them off and chasing them away.
Go to children, bitch! For the children, motherfucker! Give me my money, please go! Say free Palestine and we go! Good!
So again, look at this is like bias accounts, and this is how they're spinning what actually happened. Just like read this. I can't say too much because again, I'm on YouTube. President Biden, like, it's just wild times. Just shows you how much they spin. This is going to be the last thing I share.
President Trump,
not unbelievable anymore,
has directed Elon Musk and the DOGE team to identify fraud at the Social Security Administration. They haven't dug into the books yet, but they suspect that there are tens of millions of deceased people who are receiving fraudulent Social Security payments. And so their goal in going into the Social Security Administration is to identify three things. Number one, to identify duplicate payments and to end them. Number two, to identify payments that are going to deceased people who are no longer living and should no longer be receiving that money. And number three, to protect the integrity of this system for hardworking Americans who have been paying into it their entire lives. So rest assured to all of the people watching your show tonight, if you paid into the system, honestly, you will continue to receive your Social Security checks. Do not buy into the lies from the legacy fake news media who are trying to fear you and scare you into believing otherwise. President Trump has directed Elon Musk and the DOGE team to...
And so people, as part of the leftist psyops, are saying that he's like, again, he's attacking senior citizens now and their savings. Anyway, so according to Social Security database, these are the numbers of people in each age bucket. I think you might have meant bracket, or maybe this is just a term I'm not familiar with in this kind of a sense, with a death field set to false. Maybe Twilight is real and there are a lot of vampires collecting Social Security. So this is the age range for people against collecting the Social Security benefits. So again, 0 to 9, 38,825,456, 10 to 19, 44, 20 to 29, 48 almost, 30 to 39, 52. Then anyways, you keep on going. Okay, so you get to like around 80 to 89. Okay, so there is a drop, right? But still you'd think, okay, 90 to 99, 6 million. Okay, that's a lot of people in the US. 100 to 109, almost 5 million. How many really? And then you get into here, 110 to 119 years old. I don't know anyone that's 110 years old to 119 years old. And apparently though, there's 3 million 627,007, 120 years old to 129. Not far off. Over 3,472,849. Like, and then it keeps, come on, 130 to 139 years old. Do you know anyone that age? 140 to 149? 140 to 149 years old. Allegedly 3,542,044 people within the US collecting socials. What? 150 to 159 years old. So these guys are defying age. Like, this is amazing. 1,345,083. This is wild. And then they even had the audacity to, like, even, like, I mean, I guess at that point it's the nerve, you know, but even like 210 years old to 219 years old, 866 people. And then somehow there's more in the 220 to 229 bracket. Like, how does that even work? Like 1,039? And then you've got one person in here. 360 to 300. Wow. Okay, so I'm oh, you can't even see me because you see the presentation. It's weird. It's right. Anyway. Oh, that's too bad that you didn't get to see any of that. But you got to hear audio, I'm hoping. And so I'll be able to like look back and see. But either way, I do have to leave it at that. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.